I think it's fair to say that Anthropic didn't bend the knee hard enough or low enough. And like, that's kind of why we're here. The problem with that is that that's not good enough. Like, AI is now global infrastructure. It can't just be the throne that says, not you, but you, because it's important enough. It really does beg the question, who gets to decide?
Ron J. Williams, welcome to Future Round and Find Out.
Good to be here. Good to be here, man.
Yeah. I'm here with my friend Ron. He's an amazing entrepreneur. He's a partner at Co-Created. He's also the founder of Scam Hero. So you reached out over the weekend, actually not about the Knicks, about the crazy weird news that dropped like late on a Friday, which is the government executive order that bans Mythos, Fable 5, Anthropic's latest model, from anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, whether you live in the U.S. or not, whether you work for Anthropic or not. And as we're recording this now on a Monday morning, the situation is still unresolved. So Anthropic has pulled those models from the market. There was no real way for them to enforce only U.S. citizens using it anyway, so no one can use it. There's sort of a collective freak out and a collective, like, what does this mean? And I know you have a lot of thoughts on what this means for trust and what we build. I suspect this situation will get resolved. These models probably will come back on the market. But I don't know, man. I read a lot about this weekend too. Like the sort of arbitrariness of this coming late on a Friday. I don't know. Where do you want to begin with this?
I mean, first off, it's funny. I thought about you immediately. I was a couple of things happened. I was deep in it, using it. I was like, and I think like a lot of people, if you check the kind of nerd internet, which maybe is redundant, right? I guess the internet is full of nerds. The folks who have been playing with all these models, I was like, oh, this is, man, I spun up a whole new account just not to burn down tokens and like my working account, just to like play with Fable, right? I was like, I'm just going to build like a whole fleet of new things, right? Just like walk away and come back to a whole portfolio, products the world needs. And went to bed and woke up and was out walking my dog and like saw the news come in. It was like, oh, I guess that's not how we're spending the weekend. But as I was processing that, I thought about you and I thought about this show, because in part I was just like, man, the implications are rich. There's just so much here to discuss, because there's this incredible collision between the interests of these three groups at a minimum, right? Like the folks who govern us, right? Like institution, and at an institutional level, the market, right? The folks who make the new stuff that we get to or don't get to consume. Yeah. And then us, right? Like, how are we benefiting, harmed by all these other things? And the interests around the table, it's never been clearer. Like, we are not heavily overlapped in the Venn diagram of interests, like for those three stakeholders, those three groups. And so that really felt big and chunky, and like, Dan's gonna have some thoughts. Honestly, I'm as excited to talk to you about it and just kind of get your thoughts too, because I just think for all the incredible guests you've had on here, I don't know that any of us kind of called this moment, to use your word, of like arbitrariness, quite so. I didn't see this coming. It's such a weird turnaround.
I mean, and there's some reporting just right now, just out of Axios, that like this may have all been caused. Shocker! This is gonna be a shocker to you, from like a personality clash between Anthropic and the government. Someone's ego didn't get stroked. That seems like what happened here.
That's right.
I mean, when this happened, like, so I had recorded an episode on Friday morning with Quacko, and we talked a lot about, because just last week, both Sam Altman and Dario Amodei had both published, Sam's was literally called Our Plan for the Future, but there was no plan in it. Dario actually wrote something I thought was very thoughtful, and it called for a lot of things, including government should have the ability to reject models if there are certain risk factors to them. So he took a lot of flack over the weekend from people like, well, you asked for it, now you got it, like you got to live with it. And he obviously wasn't asking for this, and for it to be done late on a Friday with sort of this feels very arbitrary to me. But I was sort of praising Dario on Friday morning. Like I think what he's calling for is pretty sensible and detailed, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of it. A lot of other people say it's just scaremongering and doom marketing and all that. I don't know. So I had a lot of whiplash when this happened. I think a lot of people did over the weekend.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure we were consuming some of the same kind of content conversations around this. I think it's worth calling out. Like, I think about these kind of four core ideas around like, well, how do I know, if I'm in a good situation, if this is real, if this is work, like that sort of trust is a squishy thing. To make it not squishy, do I trust the sort of interest at the table? Are you looking out for yourself? You're looking out for me? You're looking out for us, right? Is there a bigger us that you're looking out for? What are your real intentions, right? Because those two things can be your expressed intentions, can be very different, right? From, your deep down dark kind of interests. And then can you do what you say you do? Like, are you competent, right? Are you rolling out good policy, taking good action, good execution? And then if it all goes to shit, do you have the skills, to repair, right? Do you have the skills to pay the bills? Can you actually help us get it back on track? The challenge for me is for the people that are giving it short shrift and just saying like, well, you asked for governance. He didn't ask for shit governance. He didn't ask for arbitrary,
that's right.
Like cronyism governance. He asked for good governance, right? And I think it's a little lazy, honestly, to sort of conflate the two, right? And I agree. I think what he laid out was both some level of doom mongering, but I also think that's appropriate given what we've seen. I think for folks who are, token maximalists are just like, hey, I'm maximalist. Like, I hear you. It's exciting. We've seen this movie through other cycles before, but never anything like this, where I think the implications long term are as to be yet that we just don't know yet exactly how far this thing goes, how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I think a little bit of care for future is in order. I think that's reasonable. And so I think, based on my reading anyway, of like what he was sort of calling for, some level of oversight is necessary. If we found out tomorrow that you could 3D print nuclear weapons, I would want some level of oversight on that. I wouldn't want ever to be like, I can 3D print dirty bombs. Yeah. Everybody gets one, Oprah style. You get a dirty bomb, you get a dirty bomb. There's a moment when if a thing can be weaponized and cause harm, even if it has the chance to also cause great benefit, man, we should have some level of oversight. Now, that gets to does it have to only come from the government if the government is not the most competent? Right, despite their interest in intent,
and which government, by the way,
and which government?
This is an international issue, and we're going to get into some of the international ramifications here.
So, I think that last point is that like who gets to decide is honestly one of the questions I think about. Trust is just for all things. I think we are in the situation that we're in globally, meaning just like a very well capitalized global north, our first trillionaire. Because we've got a relatively small set of folks on the human scale of total population driving a lot of decisions where the interest was pretty directed at market efficacy for a small kind of class of folks who just have a ton of assets already. The irony here is I probably trust Anthropic to a point. There's like a scary thing to say. I probably trust their ability to help us govern this thing more than I do our governments. And I think that's unique to who is sitting in office and the nakedly self-interested ways in which, the administration is operating. So it's just a weird
the other whiplash that, is like if you go back, Trump's literal first day in his second term, he rescinded a bunch of Biden voluntary regulations, let us review models. Yep. That was out on day one. Like, we're going to lose the race with China if we do anything like that. And then very rapidly over the last 4 or so weeks, so Mythos comes out, Anthropic and everyone say how capable it is, how scary it is. Only JP Morgan Chase and Google and a few other people can have it, right?
That's right.
Which is very effective marketing and also appears to be true.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't think we'd be where we are right now. And also, there are case studies like Firefox resolved like more bugs in like a week than they had resolved in the previous 40 years.
That's right.
Because of Mythos. So I think it's both. I don't know, good marketing, if you want to call it that, and also true.
Grounded.
But it led to the Trump executive order from I think it was 2 weeks ago, so like around June 1st. Calling for voluntary review of the most frontier models, and then very quickly to this like Friday night massacre of like no. So like I don't think we go back now. I mean, now I think it's very clear that the frontier models will be reviewed. It's kind of hard to walk back from like, well, it was so scary we had to do it immediately. We couldn't wait till Monday morning. We couldn't try to resolve it over the weekend with Anthropic. So it seems like there will be a review of models going forward. Perhaps that should be something that comes out of legislation, a new agency. You know, I think people are suggesting things like Dario suggested something like the FAA. I've seen other people suggest something like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but like some official body, not like whoever, you know, got like overly sensitive on Friday and was like, you know, screw you guys, you know,
well,
like
I mean,
no model
totally.
for you.
I mean, and also like you said, like we know, I don't know if we've ever had a greater, world's most pettiest, in office, right? I mean, this is the idea of vendetta. I don't think anybody vendetta's harder, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of sat in this office than we've seen over Trump's now second term in particular.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel well thought out, like so much, right, that we see come out. It doesn't feel like it's expansive. It doesn't feel like any. It has
It
none
was
of the
not as
hallmarks.
well thought out as this weekend's UFC match.
No, that's oh my god, right? The claw.
I mean,
that's the real claw.
That was,
match.
you know,
That's-
like it's all marketing, you know,
That's right.
fucking
It's all marketing.
flyover and the whole thing. Like,
That's right.
you know, it was about as well thought out as the like Iran invasion. That's
Correct.
my perspective.
That's right.
Yeah.
And look, you know, you invoke the clause. I'll bring it back to this. Like, what we know. What do we know about a person who's like unrepentant, shameless? They have no shame, self-promoter and self-interest maximizer. There's always a money trail to follow. Now, it turns out collectively we somehow no longer care, which is bizarre. But like, he made money on the clock. He made money on the UFC fights, right? So did Dana White. And Dana White will continue to make loads of money because the credentializing of the UFC on the White House lawn and the people's like lawn is like nuts. But okay, so here we are. Fine. I think it's fair to say that Anthropic didn't bend the knee hard enough or low enough.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of why we're here. The problem with that is that that's not good enough. Like, AI is now global infrastructure, right? It's all the, you know, that's what I'm saying, AI with a hand wave, right? But all the technologies underneath it, the harnesses, all the tech that surrounds it, these frontier models are effectively global infrastructure. It can't just be, you know, the throne that says, you know, not you, but you. Because it's important enough, I think, that it really does beg the question, who gets to decide? And any more than, you know, we wouldn't let any one nation decide the fate of the entire world's like nuclear arsenals. Like, it's inappropriate, I think, for us to wait much longer to kind of come up with that coalition. And I don't know. I sort of alluded before to like maybe I trust Ahmadi more than I trust Donald Trump. Hands down, yes. That's also not good enough, right? Like, the folks who are venture capital backed, I think we've got, you know, I've talked many times, Dan, over like predictable cycles of something being awesome, and then it starts being publicly traded. They start serving the master of public markets, and all of a sudden it gets that we right size the cost. We're like, oh shit, this is not that cheap anymore. Lyft, Uber, right? Like, it used to be a good deal. You pick up a black guy, taking me all the way to Brooklyn. Now it's like the same as a yellow cab, right? I think here there are much more potentially sinister implications of, well, only the JP Morgans and Googles get a frontier model for 3 or 6 months, then we get a totally scaled down, lockdown version of a model, and we're paying, you know, like market rate for tokens. Like, that's probably not a great world to live in either. And so I think we have to do that work now of who gets to be in the conversation, who gets to decide what are the objectives that we're setting as like the target objectives for consumers, for end consumers. Like, we know now, OpenAI is in a hot spot now, right? Like, they're in the hot seat, I should say, around like sycophancy, like, you know, models that, you know, they get you and they suck you in and they tell you what you want to hear. And this is affecting young people. This is affecting all of us, right? What is their responsibility? And again, who gets to decide? So it is this like really interesting moment, I think, for, do we trust our providers? Do we trust our you know, the folks who govern us to kind of go through the moment, or get us through the moment? Or is it just like, you know, let's pick our least worst option of folks who have like some kind of profit motivation to take care of us?
Yeah, and I mean, it's who gets to decide on so many different issues. Like, this all came about because of the cybersecurity risk. You just mentioned sycophancy, like, and so that has mental health implications if you're using it as like a therapy bot, which people, you know, maybe it's not advised, but people do it anyway. I have an upcoming episode. I actually have a previous and also an upcoming episode with Sam Gregory, who focuses on deep fakes and, you know, and non-consensual sexual imagery, like, is another risk. And, you know, and so like, in whatever regulatory regime or international regulatory regime, I don't know, that comes up, like there are a lot more issues here than just the one of this week, which is like cybersecurity. And then there's the issue of like, and I'd like to talk about the international view here. I mean, we're both in New York, but like, you know, the Prime Minister of Canada just wrote, you know, the situation we're collectively in right now with Mythos and Fable is something that can happen with over-reliance on certain models. And the lesson is that, he says, the lesson is we need to diversify. There's a lot of talk that, you know, foreign nations, companies and other, you know, like no one can rely on any one model right now. Like that
That's right.
seems to be the, you know, and so open source is having a moment right now. You know, things you can run locally.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, and this all, I'm tying a lot together here, but like this all puts, in some ways, like the U.S. economy at risk because there's so much riding on
so much.
Anthropic and OpenAI
right.
and these IPOs. SpaceX went last week, but like, yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a cluster as you texted me this weekend.
I mean, I like that you teed up that last bit too, right? Because I think when we think about future of industry, if I step away from like the individual human level, which is usually the level I like to think about, right? Like what's the impact that last mile of like real humans? If we just step back and sort of say like, in the aggregate, will America be okay? As long as we have 3 or 4 trillionaires, like, you know, like our annual GDP will be fine. If we sort of step, maybe not that far over, but like into we'll be okay. There's just a question of like, in a world where the computers can do so much of the human work, and truly, that can be done anywhere. What we're learning also is like the race to bigger and bigger models may not actually be the only race we're running here. Like to your point, there are lots of applications that are kind of token right sized for lots of different, you know, kind of functions and moments. My guess is we're going to see the rise of more little models, right? That like don't require some of the same constraints, but these frontier models will always have a special place and like be bleeding edge until they finally take all of our jobs. Maybe. Who knows? But there needs to be some notion of like ownership, right? And capital round tripping back into US based company coffers. I totally get that, right? I think what we don't know about is, all jokes aside, what happens in the span of, you know, a couple of months when 3 companies debut for like a total market cap of, who knows, $6 trillion.
Yep.
How does that shift, you know, when the inputs of industry, which used to be things that you could like point to a periodic table and say like, oh, you do trains, so like iron, like you do oil, right? So it's carbon derivative, whatever.
Yeah.
And now the ultimately everything can be abstracted back to code, and we've got machines building more machines, and we've got a few folks with their hands on those levers. Like ultimately, it's going to be a few folks, right? We've laughed and joked about it, but Elon Musk is spanning 3 Bond villain movies, right? He is like Moonraker now, right? We've got like, you know, what is it? Tomorrow Never Dies, with you know, Twitter as for rest in peace, Twitter, X as like this mouthpiece, right? To kind of shape narrative. When there's this much control in the hands of only a very few set of folks who also control like the frontier model code that is like driving so much of the rest of the industry, I don't actually know what happens next. Like that's the weird part is like, how do we control for not just, well, it's the government, not the government. Lobbying's always existed. We've never seen, I think, the connective tissue between government and industry the way that we're seeing it now, maybe, is kind of in a concentrated kind of power way.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of how people compete if they don't have access to this frontier intelligence? Because it seems like that's going to happen. Whether it happens actually because we say you can't have it, or they just simply can't afford it. They being, I don't know, you know,
sure, not
the wealthiest, you know, corporations in America. It seems like it sets up yet another like haves and have-nots, you know, situation.
I think there's definitely an apartheid AI future for sure. That I suspect, you know, there's what could happen. There's what I hope happens. Maybe we'll sort of break it up that way. What I think could fairly easily happen is what you're talking about, what I think I alluded to also, which is we all sort of wait in line with our like, please, may I have, you know, another model, some more tokens. Like we wait for that drop, right? That comes 6 weeks after, 2 months after, 3 months after. The biggies have had it, found a way to monetize us more using it, and then we get like a stripped down version of it. That's a pretty bleak future, I think, in a lot of ways, because it means that like there's almost no chance that you can then use these tools to adjust and change and shape kind of how the future unfolds. I think that's going to lead to a lot of, it's funny, I think at some level, like crime is ultimately all driven, most crime, like by the same stuff, which is just like lack, right? It's just, you don't have, and you see people who do, and so you find ways to kind of take and grab. I think we will see a lot of pressure on, like erosion of trust in these institutions, et cetera, which naturally might lead to this second thing, which is what I hope happens, but not from a place of like anger and resentment and lack, which is just, we need, I think, folks whose interests we trust. We trust that their interests are shared interests with us. So I spend a lot of time with across industries, like with businesses, with my co-created hat on, helping them figure out the next things to build, invest, and double down in. And one of the questions that comes up for me more than anything else with I only want to build impactful stuff because there's so much that's broken, is I know I put a lot of data inside of both, my ChatGPT, like my OpenAI accounts, my Claude accounts, but I don't trust them, right? I don't actually put all of my kids' stuff, right? They don't have my kids' names. They don't, right? They don't have every bit of history because I'm just like, I don't know if they they can compose this and it's like a pretty accurate representation of my kid, and then that's probably not good for them, right? This is like non-consensual. I put their data into these systems. Where are the community-owned and operated, kind of models, right? Where are the open source projects that, have a forever mandate, right, to make sure that the people with a capital P, right, have access to like fair access to stuff, especially in health and like education for their kids. I think there's room to solve for that stuff. What does it look like to have data consortia and model consortia that are just like, they have a mission statement that, hey, it may not be like the most bleeding edge, but they have some like treaties with some of these larger orgs to be like, look, we're not going to try to hack your shit and one up you on the model. It's not appropriate for the entire human population except for 4 people, right, with vested commercial interest to get access to your models. It's just not appropriate. I think that's a future I want to see me help build towards. So that's one way. Otherwise, I don't have a good answer, Dan. Like, what do you think? What do you see? Because I don't see a. Yeah. Geez,
I don't know. I mean, I'd never put it in the terms you did of the artificial intelligence apartheid. I mean, but that's sort of what I described as I led into that question. Like, I see that coming, if not somewhat already here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope that through open source and through, through other types of models that don't require, gobs and gobs of electricity and nuclear power plants and data centers and space and all that. Like, I hope that, Jan LeCun and others who say, LLMs are a dead end, I hope they're right, because I think the power consumption, maybe that democratizes things if we don't need, this ungodly amount of power.
And certainly that need is destabilizing. I mean, that's the other, I don't want to go too hard into like my, forget like doom, apocalyptic talk about models, like just the world, like how much more instability can we metabolize as a global population before it just, we, not literally explode, but we just, set ourselves up to be on a real crash course. And I think when we are converting towns into purely just power sources and warehouses for, servers. Yeah. Yeesh, it's cool to a point if you own the stock, and then it's not, right? I think there's just a moment where like, you're like, damn it, maybe we should have invested in some like services, some mental health services and like, workforce development. I don't know. Right. So,
yeah, I think the data centers, going to be really interesting. They already are. The opposition to them. Yeah. I think that the concerns about water use, I've been reading a lot of things recently, is fairly overblown from what I'm reading. Like, they do use water, but not compared to, golf courses and other things like that. Like, but they're a physical manifestation, a windowless, gigantic, Manhattan-sized, and like literally Manhattan-sized in some cases, like, farm of factories with GPUs inside. And if you feel like no one's listening to you and you have an opportunity to block this thing from being built that's, ugly, and then, maybe it brings tax revenue, which you might want, but like, I think it's gonna be really interesting as we are in an election year now, and in future elections. Like, I think these data centers, even though they're maybe not as bad as they've been, like, maybe they're not actually as bad, like, for the environmental reasons. Maybe they are, but
yeah,
but it's the leverage. It's the leverage that people have is to stop these data centers.
I mean, first off,
maybe that leads to some of this regulation we were just talking about.
I think so, but you got to stop giving golf courses a hard time, Dan. Like, people need those more than they need the water. Okay, that's first off.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think I say that as much as anything to point out, like, where I think you're headed, which I think is actually a thread to pull on, is how do we do the calculus of benefits, costs, trade-offs, long-term ROI. I think we do a terrible job in general as a species. We don't tend to think about more than the day trade, right? That we certainly don't think geological time scale. We know that. We still have people walking around saying, like, it's not that much hotter than it was when I was a kid. Bullshit, right? The data says otherwise. We don't do what indigenous folks have done forever, which is talk about contemplating how my decisions today affect 7 generations forward, Baratunde, right? I know we spend a lot of time thinking about this, talking about this stuff, right? Like, what does it look like to think past the today choice and the tomorrow, literally just tomorrow, like one day out kind of return or cost? I think that's what we need here, because to the point about data centers, yes, I've read some of the same stuff that suggests it's overblown. I tend to discount that on the face of the analysis as like the only dimension to think about. What I mean by that is there's more tax revenue and the water's not as bad, therefore good. Well, but those ugly buildings, whatever they might be, they're probably not long-term job creating. In fact, we know every single day they are likely the marginal job creating quotient, if that can be a term of art, is lowering, right? It's declining. And so in some ways, like lots of other innovation, like, you're amped for now, and then at some point there's just a smaller circle of people who are super excited because it just benefits a smaller and smaller per capita number of people is my guess. I don't know, right? Like, let's invest in getting that data, doing that analysis. But I think it's worth kind of asking ourselves, for all of this math, there must be some asymptotes somewhere, Dan. Like, there must be some upper limits of where it just goes to shit. It falls apart and the math no longer makes sense. I just wonder what those are. That's maybe I'd ask us to contemplate that.
Yeah. I don't know. But I love that you're invoking math. I share away from this, like, you view things through a lens of math. You cite asymptotes and calculus concepts more than anyone I know. How does that affect your view of this, or just sort of how you approach your work in general?
So, I mean, I annoy my kids with it because they're like, Dad, there can't be math everywhere. And I'm like, hold my beer. Yes, there is. I think it comes from, for me, this place of trying to reconcile human decision-making personally and then at scale together, right? So a lot of my journey professionally has been on a personal, just Ron level, like, hey, I think we can make money and do something good. We can do better than we're doing, right? And then really marching towards and now running full steam, full out as fast as I can towards there's only one way, I think, for me to operate anyway, and sort of, find tribe and support other people working, which is be intentional about the stuff that you build and make being reparative to the, to this moment that we're in. Because we have so many dumpster fires in so many places that even being neutral, I think, is insufficient. Okay, that's a lot of words. How the hell do you convince yourself of that meaningfully, or convince other people? And I think it is trying to understand, like, behind all these soft and squishy feeling sentiments, I think there's math. There's, like, the way the dollars flow is interesting to think about, because there's a truth in that, right? And it's not soft. If we talk about trickle-down economics, which, we were being sold that just after the last time the Knicks won a championship, right? And the numbers will tell us now definitively, we don't have to debate policy, definitively, the policies were not net positive for not just Black people and brown people in this country, but for, like, anybody who wasn't wealthy. And so it turns out, you could argue if you want, but it's utterly bullshit, just like based on the numbers, right? Like, it's utterly bullshit. that's, I think, where it derives from, is when we can start to put numbers to things and enumerate, well, okay, hold on. But I might not agree with you, but if you could show me your work and show me proof, I think it can change the shape of conversations and make us more productive. So I think that's really where it comes from.
I hope so. I mean, we're so like post-truth, post-fact
So
at this
post-truth.
point, you know, like,
I mean, I've given up, to be fair, I've given up on, this is not to convince everyone. We are actively living in a country with multiple countries in it. It is to see if we can shift parts of can we build a coalition of folks who are still open to truth, like who are still open to facts as a truly, not selectively, fact and data as a way to at least inform their feelings, as opposed to pretending they're all about facts and only operating on feelings. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Tell me about, I want to get into Scam Hero and what you're building there, and in terms of, that's one area where you're focusing on trust. Give us the backstory of Scam Hero and what you're building.
Yeah, so Scam Hero starts off really simply as I find out last year in April that my dad had been scammed for $1.6 million, which, truth be told, I didn't know that he had that much money until he didn't. And this is a guy who worked his butt off, born and raised in Harlem, brings us up in Brooklyn. And just to say the least, the most obvious and silly statement to make is like, it was a real bummer. It's like to find this out. First, because of the money. And, thankfully we were able to sort of absorb and sort of, provide him some backup. But emotionally, he felt terrible. And it really took a bite out of his self-confidence and his self-esteem. It was a romance type scam that then turned into pig butchering. So, he is a lonely person, like divorced, had some health stuff he was dealing with. So he spent a lot of time by himself, even though we physically lived close. Like, he wasn't able to spend as much time with the family as he wanted to over that prior year, and was looking for connection. And so, imagine my surprise when ultimately I found out this person he had been telling me he had connected with via WhatsApp, kind of an accidental, a wrong message, like a wrong number text.
Yeah.
For which I immediately was suspicious about. For everything I know, for the fact that I've worked for almost 20 years in some version of technology across all kinds of businesses, finance, learning, education, health, well, all of it. And even with some inkling of what was going on, I wasn't able to stop this from happening. So that's the origin story of Scam Hero. Is like, by the time it came out, and he was looking for me to, in this case, verify if the transactions, like this potential girlfriend person who was going to come down, was going to visit, stuff kept coming up because, of course, she travels internationally and all this stuff. He had done video with her dad, right? He had seen her online. From his perspective, he believed his eyes, right? She never materializes in person. They started co-investing together in these, like crypto is everywhere. Everybody's making money. He's getting screenshots of this platform that only she has access to. And it sort of kind of looks to him like, a viable platform within 2 seconds, just because of the work that I've done, you and I have done together, right? Like inside of a bank. It's like, oh, that's not what that's supposed to look like. But he didn't sort of have that context or that perspective. And he didn't want to come to me. And he didn't want to come to my sister. He didn't want to, right? He was kind of off on his own. So Scam Hero came out of that moment of, as it was then clear that it had happened, and I was helping him kind of scramble to try to stop and or recover, which unfortunately did not at all. That stuff was already gone, right, by the time I was looking at it. I really was obsessed with this one central sort of question, which was like, how do we protect folks who, in a moment, they are being manipulated, right? Like, I thought it was just him as an older person. Turns out that small business lost more money last year than seniors to scams. Like, only a little bit more, and we're talking like 2.8 billion versus 2.5. These are big numbers. That's reported, and the data suggests that the number is 15 to 20 times possibly bigger than that in terms of unreported. But I became obsessed with this question of scammers have gotten very sophisticated. They have all the technology that you and I are talking about. They are networked and connected. There are data brokers brokering our data, and they never sleep because now AI has taken this thing that was already working pretty well, like better dupes, doppelgangers, fast money, all this, like all the work we did when we were at Big Bang together, like, let's make it so like, it's almost like cash and it goes instantaneously.
Yeah.
It ain't coming back, right? You take all that stuff and then put it on AI. You don't even have to be smart now. The playbooks are out there. How do you help a population that is constantly under attack 24 hours a day help each other? And so that became a long way of sort of teeing up Scam Hero as the, one place you go for that sort of second opinion in your pocket that you can trust with no judgment. So we can kind of turn fighting fraud into a team sport, right? There's no way to do it. They are networked and connected. Yeah. We have to be networked and connected too. So Scam Hero.
So the app is you get something that you have a question mark about, and then you right now you send a screenshot, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it started off with in that exact one. It's great tee up. So at its most basic form, Scam Hero is exactly that. Something comes in that doesn't quite feel right, whatever you're looking at, you can screenshot from anywhere and just open the app and it starts analyzing. And we sort of started that way because it wasn't one app. It wasn't just Facebook Messenger or just WhatsApp or just iOS or just the dating site that he was in. It was all of it, right?
Yeah.
And the analysis is not enough. It's not enough to tell you if we think it's scam or just dark pattern spam in some cases. We got to teach you why, right? Because it turns out awareness, if you have sustained sort of education around awareness, you can drop your likelihood of being scammed by 86% over the course of a year. It's this monumental shift. It also turns out that this is a lot like pandemic math, right? If I'm wearing a mask, that's good. But if I make you put on a mask too, if I'm like, I've influenced your thinking, this inoculation spreads. So I'm going to teach you. We're going to tell you why. You're going to talk about it more and actually wind up educating other people.
Yeah.
But we're going to help you take those safe actions, right? When you report it, we're not just reporting it to Apple or your carrier. It's also going out to law enforcement. So we made like one tap to tell, to like report really simple. And to bring your network in. And so this idea started there, and now what we're rolling in conjunction with partners, right? Like folks who are conveners of community, or folks who are embedded even in some cases in government, is access that just compounds safety because it's anything I know, and vice versa. So it's a network intelligence application of safety that like we just haven't really seen before. But we desperately need it.
So. Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to ask, like, you said you got obsessed with this problem, and I know you built the first versions. You're tinkering. You're on your own, right? I mean, because it speaks a lot of like how new apps, how new products come to be right now. Is one person gets obsessed with something, and then I know you brought in a team eventually. But like, what did you learn as you like dug in and started as a non-engineer started building?
Yeah, I mean, look, as a person I pulled together teams to work on pretty hard stuff. I enjoy technology. I'm pretty facile. I can sort of speak to and understand terms in the sort of abstract. That is so different from building a production grade, like piece of code. And so I think one of the early lessons I learned is that empirically, there's still room for human engineers, right? For sure, right? Claude is and OpenAI are, and these latest models set aside, which we don't even have access to, Dan. I don't know if you've heard. They are still, for the most part, fancy autocomplete machines, right? And so you will autocomplete based on a pattern that seems to work, which means if Ron has built spaghetti code to get this one first feature working, that is the base pattern upon which the next code will be built. It's not going to refactor, and I don't know how to make it refactor, right? Mm-hmm. So you build inefficiency and spaghetti code crap on top of inefficiency and spaghetti code crap, but the user-facing bit works. And that's awesome. To be honest, like that was what I needed, was to make sure I could get an end-to-end thing working that I could put in front of 50 people and have them tell me like, this sucks or that sucks, or this is awesome. Oh my God, I know 5 people that need this. So that is great. So I think this is the sort of primitives that I might have used as a now long-term kind of founder and helping other people build stuff are more sophisticated. I don't have to say to my engineers, hey, it's a thing like this, and let me get my design guy, and then I can do a really ugly design with Claude. No disrespect, Claude, but those designs are so wonky sometimes. But I can convey it. I can make it clickable. I can even now build and deploy it, right? Like launch it and actually have it tied to a branch of our DB. Like these are all things that are doable. That changes the quality of conversation with them. So when you finally write a PRD, that's going to go to production. It's not Ron designating database schema. I should not be doing that, it turns out, Dan. But right, like it's totally different conversations. That part's good. So I think the sort of like biggest lessons learned are like, don't ever think that the 0 to 1 in this case is necessarily more than a prototype, but it's a pretty damn good prototype in a way that just didn't exist when we were kind of, early kids in the internet.
Yeah.
Anything you want to build, you're like, all right, I got to convince 5 engineers to work for me. And now it's so different. It really it's pretty crazy. I mean, I'll tell you one quick story, not about Scam Hero, but like adjacent to. My daughters both like spelling, right? They're not. I'm trying to push them to be like the spelling bee kid. Get on the stage.
They're not math kids.
Right? No, come on. You know that I'm trying. I get a lot of crap in my house, but I'm trying. Okay. But I built for my older one probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago. She wanted to practice, and I was like, cool. I can't always stop what I'm doing and practice all the time. I'll practice most times on the weekend, however much you want.
All right.
Oh, I think I'm going to build her a little spelling bee app.
Yeah.
And I had a friend help me. He's an incredible engineer, but he's not an app developer. Like he's like an infrastructure DevOps, like wunderkind. But it wasn't really his jam. 3.5 months in, I'm like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing? Replit launches. I try to I don't love what I'm seeing. And then I was like, maybe I'll just try this like in a naked chat with ChatGPT. This is pre-Codex. This is just like I built 85% of what it had taken him 3.5 months to build for me, with me, his friends, who's just like hooking me up. He was interested in 7 minutes. And again, this is like very simple, for those who are old enough, speak and spell, but digital. And what if you can, it will say the word that you're supposed to spell, then detect whether or not you spelled it correctly, right, via audio. And this is 2 years ago. So like the tools are so much better now, 2.5 years ago. Everything's better now. 7 minutes for like a V00.1. And it'd take like literally almost all the features that he had over 3.5 months. That's kind of where we are. And for obviously people know that, but it's been incredible.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, intellectually I know that, but then when you said 7 minutes, you didn't say 7 days even, right? Like
no, and look, it wasn't. Again, it was more prototype. It wasn't like production. It wasn't, but like just again, getting ideas out of your head. Which I'll use that as a springboard just to say like to loop back to something we were talking at the top.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, the opportunity now is to deeply invest in problems that matter. We don't need more ad tech. We don't need more kind of pizza ordering apps. We need everybody, most especially folks with lived experience, to be equipped, supported, socially capitalized, and of course, really capitalized to build against problems they see, right? Because that's now the magic is like, you don't need a couple of Silicon Valley bros to show up and be like, whoa, you know what's kind of hard, as I understand it from my friend, is, black maternal fatality is like super, super high. We should you don't need that. Like, stay in your lane. Like, let's just make sure that folks who actually know the problem space, these big, chunky problems that are reparative, right, that will make shit better for more people.
Yeah.
Let's throw dollars and, tech and support at them, right? Like, I think that's what's kind of cool is like, everybody can be at least a contributor to architecting solutions to problems that they uniquely see. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. And I'm glad you tied it back. I was going to do the same and ask, like, with what you're describing, like, again, we were talking about access to this intelligence. Like,
yes,
I don't know, what do you think? Do you think it'll be required to, like, mandate certain access for certain people or countries, or I don't know, or will that happen naturally because these things are just going to get so low cost? Do you have any sense of, I don't know, where?
I don't
that's
trust.
A big question, but.
Yeah, that's a big question, Dan. And one, this is like it's sort of like this is not investing advice. This is not a prediction. It's not prognostication. I'll frame it again the way I did an earlier part of the conversation. I have deep fears, like deep-seated fears about one outcome, and that drives my kind of interest in trying to solve for it a different way. My deep fear is that if I look throughout history, anytime we've let the market run rampant and said, yeah, man, invisible hand, baby, it's going to figure it out. It's going to be fair and awesome.
Uh-huh.
That is not what happens. Adam Smith didn't believe in that version of invisible hand, even though he is off-sided, right? Like you need some measure of trustworthy individuals, groups, coalitions, to kind of keep a steady hand and like point us towards our higher selves, right? In moments where profit taking and short-term thinking is much easier to kind of think about. So I don't trust that we will kind of get there. I think it's very likely that we will have just digital versions of global north and global south, and global north won't even be that big. It'll be like, the state of Musk and the state of, Altman, and China. It's just like, and that's it, right? So I don't think that will be enough. I think it's probably three parts. One is it is appealing to the higher sense of those that are the best capitalized and have the most power to realize like the ultimate legacy is not monuments to yourself or fucking names on other people's art centers. Nobody in particular, just thinking about that as a like an example, right? It is ultimately service. Are you the person like helped cure pediatric cancer? People will talk about you for 10,000 years, man. Like that's such a better legacy than like I took all the jobs, right? As a for instance, right? And so how do we one just appeal to like it ain't gonna be everybody, but to some of the folks who have enough power, have enough dry powder, have just enough access to really shift allocation of capital, time, attention, talent, to point them out like what version of the Matrix do you want to live in, man? Like whatever, that kind of thing. I think the second is we have to prove that there's benefit. Back to the math thing. I think a lot of business people, a lot of the most powerful, often scions, they were born into power and money, and now, they're kind of paying it forward. We've propagated this really paternalistic ideal of just like, well, these people don't really know what's good for them. And that's bullshit, right? And I think there's super good evidence through lots of points in history that are not the Western hegemony, like the kind of version that precedes this late stage capitalism moment that we're in, that suggests like tribe does well, like community does well. The community is the shit. Like let's invest in community, and communities we don't need to fight about water in the way that we did maybe 10,000 years ago. So like maybe data centers, right? Maybe, but like communities being interconnected and intra-connected is actually powerful. How do we prove that equipping more people, giving more access proactively is actually net good for all of us? You might have 2% less, in your bank account and your kind of, offshore accounts that the government can't see for tax purposes, but you're getting like a 10% lift in long-term stability of like our society. Is that good? Probably. And then I think the third thing is when I look out at like all these different players, I don't know how we get through the moment without coalition. So there's like community in the community, like, locally, like us, just us little people. I don't know if the UN can do it. I don't know if, it's just the big A. Like, I don't feel great about and then maybe it's just the US being where it is. Like the irony of, for instance, having the World Cup happen now. I don't think I've ever felt like we were more on the outside of the international, like global community than we are now.
Deliberately so right now.
Deliberately. Right. Self-imposed. We've made ourselves like these incredible pariah, as a nation, a pariah. But that's not sustainable. Like, how do we get back to the like a much bigger table, right? I think that's it. That's like, I don't know how, ironically, it's not just land. I think AI is going to force our hand on, like, if we don't find coalitions, then it's like everybody's a state actor, potentially. Everybody's a threat because, they've all got this tech. So long-winded way of saying, I don't know, but I suspect those three things, we got to do better on where we put our attention, the richest in the world. Are we empowering people to participate? And are we really asking our governments to like do the fucking work, man, and like sit down at tables together?
Yeah, so. and not make Friday night decrees.
Oh my gosh, no.
I mean, a lot of what you just mentioned is some of that is in that Dario Amodei document from last week. Thinking about some of these implications, and like you just said, everyone is a state actor. I mean, that's something he was writing about. I think let's leave it there, and we'll see where we go. Ron, thank you so much. This is really fun.
Thank you, man. This is a lot of fun. Yours is a voice. There are always good conversations on the other anywhere your voice is. I'm excited to hear how other people think about this stuff too, because it's heady, it's big. Got to do the work.
Right on. This is Future Around, and find out. Sign up for the newsletter at futurearound.com. Ron, peace.
Peace.